Greetings, everyone. We'd like to welcome everyone to our Macro Social Work Podcast. We have an exciting guest on today. Her name is Miss Joanna Bartholomew, a change agent, economic change agent, many years in the social work practice, but expertise in financial business. And her desire as a licensed financial coach is to specialize in services for small businesses, owners, and middle income families to create financial plans of purpose. She desires creating atmospheres and spaces for economic change as a community change agent, housing, urban development, financial planning, food access programs, and building and construction. And so I had the opportunity to meet Ms. Bartholomew over the last year, and desire to expose emerging social workers into non-traditional social work positions where we can have sustainable generational impact. And we welcome you on today. So welcome, Ms. Joanna Bartholomew.
Thank you so much, Gary. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, everyone, for having me here today.
Yes. And so as we begin our conversation today on macro social work stories, we want to talk about your journey into the social work profession.
You really want to know that story, huh? Okay. So initially, when I started out, I had my undergrad in public and community health from Delaware State University. And, when I started out more in the behavioral sciences field, really was in the counseling field at that point. And I was working in a school setting. And I said, this is pretty okay. You're here with the kids, you're here on base, but something's missing, and I didn't know what that thing was. I wasn't really sure, and I ended up speaking to a colleague of mine, and she said, have you ever thought about social work? I said, well, I mean, I'm already doing counseling. Why would I go and get a social work? Things like, no, it's different. It's not counseling. It's still a little bit different, and it can still be a great asset to your undergraduate degree as well. So I started to explore, and I said, this seems pretty great. Has different lanes. We have clinical practice. I could work in a macro level. And then I said, I'm working for the school district of Philadelphia. This is a place where people just don't up and leave once you're in. And I had a daughter. I have a daughter, and at the time she was a toddler. And I wanted to make sure that I was making the right decision and looking at all of the programs. Everything was saying you would need to go basically full time to really make this work. So I was making a huge risk after already finishing one master's degree and an undergrad to go back to school. And I saw an opportunity for a graduate assistantship, and I'm a woman of faith, so I prayed on it, and I said, okay, God, if this is supposed to happen for me, just let the doors be open. So I emailed every department, hear me good. I emailed every department on Westchester's campus, told them my story, said, hey, and this was after I applied to the program. I didn't even wait to get accepted. I applied for the program, and then I emailed every dean, every chair on campus and said, I am going to be enrolling. I spoke it into existence. I said, I will be enrolling in the MSW program, and I'm seeking a graduate assistantship. Two people respond. No, not two people. One person responded. One person. That one person ended up taking me on as their graduate assistant for 2 years. When she looked it up, because she invited me to come out for an interview, she said, you're very bold. She said, you're not even accepted into the program. I called over to the MSW department. They said, she's not even a student yet. We're still going through application. I said, I was just being very, assertive. And I just know that I was going to get in. And I prayed on it. And if it was going to be for me, it would be. And to this day, that is my mentor. She is also now the president of the Council of Social Work Education. That is Mildred Joyner, Dr. Mildred Joyner. And she has been my mentor for years. I've done so much great work with her. Who knew that of all people, she would see my email? Ironically, after getting out of a meeting with the president of the university, because at that time, I think that she was getting ready to take on a role with NASW. No. She's the president of NSAW now. At the time, she was getting ready to take on a role with CSWE. And the only way it was going to work is if they would let her have an assistant. So she walks back into her office and she sees my email. So it's like all these things just aligned, and I believed it. And, it ended up being even more than what I could have expected. So that's how I got into the field of social work. But when I think about it, I was already practicing in that field before the title came, working in the school setting, doing group sessions, working with students one-on-one, learning how to really break down and get to the underlying challenges and keeping it very, client-centered. So that was really happening even before enrolling in the program. So I must say that obtaining my master's in education and counseling really opened up the door for that.
So we can see how your initiative, because today you are a founder and CEO of
Yeah.
a community organization.
Yes.
We can see how your desire to make things happen can aid one who is over an agency to bring about sustainable change in that process. So thank you for sharing that, how that interest into this field began. And so as we look at your education, we look at the fact that you have a desire to do things differently. Because we want to make sure that things are done that are impactful. So as your journey, what kind of impactful things have you take risks to make sure that impact takes place rather than doing traditional 9 to 5?
Okay, so working with Professor J, I still call her Professor J to this day. She used to tell me the answer is not no, it's how can we get it done? So when she would have to travel to DC often in her role, and this was during the time when Obama was in office, she would leave me with certain tasks. And I remember maybe by the second time I asked her a question and she said, listen, I don't micromanage. So I'm giving you this task. I trust you. I think that you have the right skill for it. Don't think about you always having to check in with me. As long as it meets, the guidelines of social work education, as long as we can get to the end result, let's get it done. And if you've given it everything that you have and it doesn't work out, then come back to me. And I said, okay, I can make this work. I mean, I was fundraising on campus for the Frederick Douglass statue through her. I was doing, a number of things under her wing. And I knew that I had to give it everything that I had to make it work. And I bring that up because that same skill I then used later on when I said, being in case management is not enough. Being a director of a social work agency is not enough. Something else is missing here because I keep running into the same consumer, just a different face. So something is not adding up. Whether I was working as a clinical social worker in a hospital or whether if I was working in a traditional agency, I still ended up coming back to the same thing where wealth or the lack of it was the challenge. Access to resources was the challenge. Housing was the challenge. And when we would explore this, some of the answers that we would often get was, I just didn't know. No one told me. So then when I would assess the educational curriculum, well, financial literacy is not mandated. So I created a financial literacy program and I started to pitch it to different schools, right? Then I started to, I was a career coordinator over a charter school here in the Philadelphia area. And we were talking about careers and we were talking about college, but again, we're not talking about money. But yet this is the same thing that people deal with when they graduate from school is student loan debt. So I extended the program and I pitched the idea to a couple local credit unions and banks and said, would you partner? One bank said yes. I now sit on their board today. So they said yes, and we've partnered and we've provided financially fit opportunities for students. The CEO of the branch, when we had our first event, he matched the kids' amount of money that they brought in to open up their first account with their parents. It was like amazing. So I always go back to when Professor Jay says the answer is not no, it's how can we get it done? And when we then took it to the next level, and I said, okay, it is really time for you to lay the real foundation. You've been doing this for other organizations. They're giving you raises, you're getting the bonuses, and that's all great, but still something is missing. And I knew it was time for me to jump. It was time for me to jump out there. No matter what I was doing in the area of counseling and financial education, and social work. I was always raised in a household with an entrepreneur. My father, he raised me and exposed me to real estate. I mean, first Saturdays of the month was picking up rent from tenants, and I didn't even know what that really was. I just felt like I'm here with dad. I get a lollipop when I go to the bank because I fill out the bank slip. Like, that's all I really knew. It wasn't until I really got into the field of counseling and social work that I realized everybody else's Saturdays does not look like this, because information that I was privy to, other people weren't. And I was like, wow, like this is a real problem. Like, we really have to address this. So fast forward in 2017, when I decided to leave everything. So when you ask how, what did I do? I left everything. I put everything on the table. When I say everything, everything, retirement accounts, everything. I'm giving you the real deal, Gary. You asked for everything. I'm telling you. I put everything on the table, and I left my job, and I said, I'm going to develop a community development company. My dad at the time was not able to really see the vision of what I was trying to explain. He was still a bit stuck in the, let's do some flips, let's do just some basic rentals. And I'm like, that's not bad, but that's not it. So fast forward, I ended up with a colleague in the Baltimore area. And I was looking for something. I just knew that I was looking for something. And I pray a lot. Like I said, I'm a woman of faith. And I was like, God, just lead me to the right place. And ironically, he had just gotten to the real estate space. He was working with a developer in the area. I reconnected with him through his wife. We all went to undergrad together. And he invited me down. And I've been to Baltimore several times, but I never went to Baltimore with the lens that I had on that day. And when I pulled up and I saw them developing the majority of the block, but yet people that looked like me were walking by and just seemed like they had no clue what was happening in front of their face, that they were preparing to be displaced. They would not be able to afford these homes. I said, oh my goodness, this is it. And that's how O'Hara Development Partners came about. I said, okay, we're going to formalize a company and we're going to do mixed community living. We're not just going to build around the people, we're going to build with the people. So in our pillar, we have green space development. We have housing and financial education. We actually partnered with NHS of Baltimore, which also stands for Neighborhood Housing Services of Baltimore. So as we are building, we provide an opportunity for our future home buyers to go through housing and financial education courses. We have it packaged very nicely with about $43,000 towards down payment assistance. They also get 2 years post support. So even as they close out the program, they get to meet with their financial housing or their financial and housing counselor once a quarter, just as a check-in. How are things going? Hey, did you know the city passed this law that, if your roof is X amount old, you can get a new one discounted? I don't know. Like just having that extra resource while you're trying to deal with the kids and now you're trying to manage a household. So that's how we were able to get to this point where we packaged this in a way that it hits in different areas. We're reducing vacant lots in the Baltimore area. We're reducing vacant homes, but we're doing it from the heart of the people, asking them what they need and trying our best to give them exactly that so they don't feel displaced.
Wow. Gary, was there something else you wanted to say, or can I jump in or what?
We'll let you jump in.
Yeah, wow. There's like 12 things I want to ask. Well, there's a whole bunch, but one of them, first off.
I know that was a lot.
Oh, no, it was like amazing. It was wonderful. Part of it is, social work is afraid of money, right? It's afraid of well, it's not afraid of money. Christy, you and I talked about this, and social workers don't make enough money. That's one of the big things we also talk about. But social work's afraid of capital. It's part of what you're talking about. I don't mean big capital, global capitalism, but money to invest that actually is invested in a community. Social workers don't do that. We do services over here, somewhere over there, where we might do financial literacy on your checkbook, but the financial literacy you're talking about is much deeper.
Yes.
And then over here is getting people comfortable with the responsibility and the opportunity of what it means to create wealth through home. That's a scary thing. It's like your model there's a book here. That would be later.
Literally.
Yeah, there's a book here too. But this thing about either or, I mean, I would imagine some social workers would look at you like you had two heads or three eyes or something.
Mhm.
Have you gotten that experience where people go, huh? We
Uh,
don't do that.
I did. To be quite honest with you, when I was the career coordinator at a charter school, I decided to go and get my financial licenses. So I'm also like federally licensed. Like I can do investments and things of that nature. And people were saying, "Well, are you no longer a social worker?" And I felt pushed out. I didn't feel recognized. So I'm being quite honest. I didn't have a subscription for any of the acronyms in the field. I said, there's no need. There's no place for me there. Any of the things that came out, it didn't say anything about wealth. It didn't attract anything for me. I mean, I wasn't in the clinical practice anymore. I tried reaching out to schools to see if they would be willing to do something different. I didn't get any responses. So, why would I really want to even pursue a doctorate? I really felt pushed out of the field. It wasn't until one day Professor J called me, and she just has a way of gracefully provoking you to do better. I must say that she has a way of doing that. And she said, it's time to pass the baton. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, is something wrong? Like, what's happening? She said, no, it's time to pass the baton, and it's time for the face of social work to grow and to change. And what you've been doing is exactly that. And, so that's how we actually came up with Social Work Voices. And we had our first event in Martha's Vineyard in 2019. And that was where we decided to say, we're going to start breaking the silos in social work practice. I had my first talk in a room of deans and, university presidents and so forth that were in the field of social work, and all they know is those three buckets that everybody talks about when you fill out the application and you check off. And here I am showing them, here's the block, or I should say now the neighborhood that we have bought as a company that we are developing, and their faces were like, whoa, a social worker bought a neighborhood. Yes. And after that, I felt freedom. I felt like I was seen. I had to step away to a degree from the practice in this traditional sense to do something that was non-traditional, to then come back to the village and say, this is what it could look like if we did this. This is what it could look like. And, what I wanted to do is to link with neighboring colleges and universities and get students that were in the field, and say, this is what it could look like. It doesn't have to always look like clinical practice. It doesn't always have to look like you're an educator. It doesn't always mean that you have to work in hospice care. It can look like this too. It's not something that you have to, make a decision and stick in that field all the time. And then the next level to that is where, as a social worker, we have intellectual capital like none other.
Joanna,
yes.
Where do you think that resistance comes from? I mean, you're describing it well, like the shock being there is real. I was there. It's true. But anytime it's anything outside of our buckets or silos or however you want to refer to it, there's such a resistance to doing something different. Where do you feel that's coming from? Where do you think that's based?
I think it starts from the top. We have to restructure. I mean, if you've always provided 3 buckets and now somebody's coming with a 5th one, let alone, it's like, what? Who does that?
Right.
Where? How do we even get? I mean, just like Steve just said, we're as a field, we're afraid of the word money. Yeah. So, if we're not even engaging that a part of the conversation in those classrooms in our field practice, how do we expect for people to do it on the other side, right? When we are the people that carry some of the most intellectual capital. I have an ebook series that I'll share about, a little bit later, in our time here together. But a lot of that came from writing all of those papers, understanding theory, how to break it down, how to not talk over people, keeping it very, consumer focused, client focused, however we want to phrase it, that came from that. I did so well in a financial firm not because I, knew how to do the best financial plans, but because I knew how to talk to people, ask them what they want. What do you want your retirement to look like? Where did I learn that? Social work, right? So we have these skills that if we're like, I want people to really understand social work is not a box. We are like a chameleon. Anything that we mix with gets better. And we need to think that way. And I think if from the top we look at it that way, we will have more people coming into this industry like none other, because then they'll say, I can do social work and I can do the medical field. I can do social work and it's with finance. I can do social work and entrepreneurship. We're a chameleon. Anything that it's like sugar. You put sugar in anything, it just about tastes good. And, it's like mayo. What sandwich have you said it's horrible because mayo was on it? Like nobody says that, right? So that's how I kind of look at it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Christy's been a leader not on the wealth part, but on the income part, where she said, hey, there's really a need for social workers to make the right kind of income. And there's this thing that's out there about social work. And Christy, I know you've gotten pushback. I know I've gotten pushback on this.
Yeah, on Twitter. We're not in it for the money. We're not in it for the money.
Oh, we all know we come into the field where we don't expect to be rich. And then they beat themselves on the chest. And then what? Live poor? I mean, it's not like, if you're gonna make $47,000 a year and have a family and live in any urban area, you're gonna be stretched. So this idea that I think the leadership has gotten so used to saying, well, we're not in the field for money. Well, nurses say, damn, we want to get paid.
Yeah.
And in order for us to do so, the leadership of our field, and I think Professor J, Dr. Joyner is the type of leader we need, who's not afraid to step out.
Oh, no, she's not.
And in my experience in this, it can be lonely when you do if you don't have other support.
Yeah.
Everybody, oh, well, that's her. Oh, that's him. Oh, that's Christy going off again.
Making noise.
Yeah, and that is something we really have to break through about the leadership, which I think is going to come from your generations and younger saying, because I'm of the older generation, but the older generation, if they're not willing to open up these boxes and see you all as the leaders, the field's in trouble.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm very intentional, even with my media platform, on just about the majority, I want to say, of my posts. I always put hashtag I am social work, because I want people to know this is what social work can look like. So it's those small things that we can do along the way to get people to wake up to the field and know that we do have a place. It doesn't mean that just because your lane looks a little bit different than my lane, that it's less valuable. So, that's something that I do on the platform. And when you were talking about, when it comes to income, last night I did a course, and I won't go into numbers, but I did a course on my own. And the course was, before you building from the heart of the community. That's what the course was. I gave a couple points on what we're going to cover between real estate financial terminology, how to keep the people first, and how to use real estate strategies to pay for itself, right? So if we don't have the money, well, let's learn some concepts on how we can make it pay for itself. People bought the class, and we locked in for 2 hours, and I made income last night, during that time frame. And we should not be afraid to do that, because we went to school. We're probably some of us still paying on these degrees, and we need to be able to be compensated for our time. I tell people, once it goes beyond 15 minutes, this is now this is a formal consultation that does come with an invoice. And as social workers, we should not be afraid of that. There is a fee for our intellectual capital, because we save lives, we change worlds, we change nations.
Yeah.
Joanna, I think you're talking about title protection in a different way. Usually we're talking about people who are non-social workers practicing or saying they're social workers and didn't have a background in social work. But I think more what you're talking about is I'm still a social worker, even if I've left the traditional box of social work. And I think that's an important message that we haven't created yet. And maybe we should be promoting that more. I am social work. It doesn't mean you're doing just these. And I was that 2 weeks ago. Well, I don't remember last week when we were talking about social work isn't just when you're doing a job search, it doesn't have to just be MSW required, LCSW required. There are a lot of jobs where we qualify with, the MSW or as a social worker, but we don't really acknowledge it within our universities because we don't understand it. So it's avoided.
That's a valid point.
So,
Valid point.
Anyway, you're fantastic.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
It's interesting. I literally, years ago when I went into, when I started doing consulting and training and coaching, I was great until I had to ask for my fee. I literally went into therapy for about 2 months to see what is it about me that's afraid to say, I can speak in front of, and have in front of 5,000 people, but to say to somebody directly, I deserve to make this money was something I had a hard time in. And I think this field, that a lot of us are drawn to this field where we think we're never going to have to deal with this money thing. And we have a problem of stating our own worth. And I think you're claiming your own worth comfortably as a model that a lot of us have to embrace, as opposed to that we're being selfish. I mean, I have a whole thing about, you're selfish if you want to make a decent income. That thing that's in our field that allows that to exist as an idea is really part of what causes the field to have problems.
Thank you. And it didn't happen overnight. It took time to get to this. I will say when I decided to work part-time at a financial firm, that probably is where it really riled me up, because they work in competition. On the outside, we're sweet as pie working with you in your home and trying to help you create your retirement portfolio. On the inside, they're like, how much did you do this week? Well, this is what I did this week. How much in many insurance policies did you close? And I didn't like that. I said, wait a minute, they talk very boldly about I had a $20,000 week, or I had a $20,000 day. So they would put us up in front of the room and we would have to disclose, obviously not going into personal information, but we would share our stories and how did we have XYZ happen. And now looking back, that also played a role in me being okay and saying, and this is how much the course is, and this is the value that you get. This is the time that we're going to state what you're going to get, but yes, there is a fee for that, so I will say that part of my experience did come from that, but I believe that maybe some part of the social work practice could have that same part, right? Where we talk about the value that we bring and how does that look for us stating a price. Even if it comes from a budgeting perspective, if you're saying that you want to go into clinical practice, you want to own your own practice, we should talk about what does that look like as far as an operating expense? How much does the suite cost? How much does it cost to keep the lights on, to pay for your administrative assistant to answer the phone while you're in a session? And I think if we take it from that aspect, now it's like, for me, just to keep the lights on is $1,500 a month. Just the lights on, then I need to be, and you work it backwards. So that's what we used to do in the financial firm. We would work our numbers backwards, and that's how we would be able to see where we should fall when it came to different products and things of that nature for that fit, the appropriate client that we were working with. So I think if we were to do those type of things and show the students why money is so important for us to discuss, now we are at the aha moment, because the goal is you want to be in clinical practice. It's not about the money. You want to be in clinical, or you want to
and pay your bills. Yeah.
You want to pay your bills and you want to service clients, but you can't do that at $2 an hour. That's not going to work. Your business will close or not even open, for that matter, doing it.
And plus, you've got the insurance company to battle with. So if they're only going to give social work versus psychology, what is it, $60, $80, depending on what part of the country you're in, you're not going to keep the lights on through insurance reimbursement. And you also have to have the time, even if you can manage with it, you can't do the what do you call that, the supplement. So you can't say insurance will cover this much, now I'll charge you the rest. Basically, you get you're not allowed to do that either. And
Right.
So a lot of our MSWs thinking they're going into clinical practice have no idea how insurance works. So there's this light at the end of the tunnel, apparently, of private practice and the money you're going to make there, and that you'll be your own boss, when truly you're answering to insurance companies, unless you can manage that also depends on the area, someone who's going to be able to pay an hourly fee without insurance. So, which isn't Doesn't really tie as much into what we do.
This is why overwhelmingly most social workers only do part-time practice, because they
Right.
have to do full-time agency work for underpay, and then they do their part-time practice. They end up being exhausted and never quite making what they deserve to make. Could you talk about, you mentioned the ebooks and the curriculum at the very beginning. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because that's exciting too.
Sure, I definitely will. So we have this year, our theme is Before You Build, right? And it's Before You Build because I want people to know before you get into the real estate industry, and I'm going to tie this into something that you just said, Christy. So it's called Before You Build because I believe that where I bled or where my coaches that I paid for that has given me great guidance and leadership, where they have bled, you should not, because we've already had the experience, right? So Before You Build is a ebook series, is a 4-part ebook series. We just released our first one last month on how to be able to make intentional decisions around community development where you can reduce your financial risk and you're making decisions that really make a positive impact in the community. So in this first volume, we break down who should be on your real estate development team or your community development team. We identify various financial resources in regards to grants and different subsidy options in your development so you could provide affordable housing or cater to certain demographics for services in regards to, whether you're providing senior living or you're doing transitional housing or you're providing VA housing. So we provide a great breakdown in that. We also go into some of the federal policies that are there that can support us in our plans. Because what I've often found as a social worker is that people quickly say, I don't know, no one told me. So I said, well, before you build, before you step out there, I want you to read this. And the next section, a couple of the next upcoming sections will cover, before you build, how to secure the bag, right? So how do you go about the lending process? Because the lending process can be a headache. I mean, even when you're buying your own personal home, just going through that process can be frustrating enough. So now you add on, commercial financing. That's a whole other layer. And if you don't go about it correctly, you waste time, you waste money, and then you get burnt out and you're like, I don't want to deal with this. But if you are able to have somewhat of a manual along the way to support you, it can definitely be very beneficial. So I intentionally did not start volume 1 with anything around securing the bag and making money, because real estate is about people. That is what real estate is. Real estate is about people. So we wanted to identify this first one as building from the heart of the community, because I want people to know how to engage with political leaders, how to engage with the neighborhood association, the corridor meetings that are taking place. How do you do that first and hear what they need before you come into an area and say, well, I'm going to put up this high rise, or I'm going to just do a whole bunch of rentals in this zip code. How do you know that they don't need more home ownership opportunities if you never went to a meeting, if you've never asked questions? And what I often tell people is that, when you go into these communities, you need to be very quiet when you go into the room. Your position there is to be quiet and observe. See who's the decision maker, who's the one that they refer to get final confirmation. You do that a couple of times. Hear what you don't walk into the meeting and say, oh, I'm ready to present. You don't even know the zip code. You don't even know who the, association president is, right? You don't know how this thing flows. So your role to go in is to really be quiet and assess the room. And then you're able to say, okay, I know that I want to do real estate, but I'm hearing what the community needs. And now I can build based upon that. And we do it in a way, guys, that whether you're doing one block, whether you're doing one house, or you got courageous like me and decide to, help rebuild a neighborhood, you can still apply these same strategies. You're just taking it to the next level. Back to what you were just saying, Christy, when we're talking about, someone that's going into practice, and this is why putting real estate and social work together is super important. Not just labeling it as economic. That's too broad. Let's get direct to it. We're talking about money and we're talking about real estate. Why we should bring it together is because if I was the field instructor, if I was the professor of that particular course that's assisting with, your transition within your last 2 years, and I'm hearing that you want to go into practice, what you should also know is how you can own that building. How could you own that building and you have your commercial space downstairs? You offer the units upstairs as rental options, right? Whether you're working part-time or not. And now the building is, for the most part, paying for itself. So you're not taking on the stress of, oh, I have to see so many clients. I have to, because the building is taking care of itself. Now you can really focus on building your practice and not just providing services here and there just to be able to get your billable hours up. But if people don't understand that even in a mixed use building that does not exceed 4 units still qualifies as a owner occupant, you can still fall under the FHA guidelines, they miss that opportunity. And you can still get 3.5% down. But if you don't know these things, you will think that there's no room for you. It's impossible to own a practice. It's no way that I can do it.
Right.
And that's not true. So that is the reason why I think that bringing these worlds together is important. When we break down the word real estate, real meaning, tangible, something that it actually, when we break it down, it means Rex. I'm going to get into a little bit of something here. It means Rex. It often was used during the time of kings when they would identify, their land. Then when you break down estate, it means royal interest, manor. What is your royal interest in land? We cannot have social work practice without people knowing their royal interest in land that, again, I'm a woman of faith, that I believe that God has given us dominion and authority over already. It is yours. But if you don't know that, you'll walk around on land like you're leasing and you own it. You have to go back to your original DNA, and that is ownership. People fought over land. People married over land. And that's why we have these rules that even if you're not a citizen, you can own land. The country loves business owners, right? So we complain about money, but are we teaching our future social workers about the tax laws that benefit their practices? They don't know.
Yeah.
But then if somebody else does it, then, we're saying it's a crime. No, they exist in a book and somebody follows them and they don't get taxed as much. And you could do it too if we're teaching them. But instead, right now, we have very strict boxes that we have on applications for people to check off. We come out of school with a lot of debt and we're expecting our students to just figure it out. And they're getting burnt out and they leave the field because now in 2021, where they can see, well, I could become a YouTuber. I could do this. I could do that. Why would I ever stay in the field of social work and be broke? Because we're not talking about the very thing that they already have dominion and authority over. And that is the land that they walk on every day. And because a social work is a chameleon, it can go into any part of it, however you choose to. So I'll give another example before, I don't want to keep going on a rant, but I hope you guys are feeling where I'm coming from here. With our green space development, we have a business structure that makes sense for that. So if someone says, I really want to get into the green space, I want to do things that are eco-friendly, real estate that's still real estate. So what we do for every home or every building that we sell or home that we actually rent out, we take a small percentage. We donate that to our CDC, which is a nonprofit. And that nonprofit is what takes care of the land that we manage through either the Adopt a Lot program in Baltimore or for land that we actually own, which we're actually doing a sponsorship campaign right now, as we're going to be putting a neighborhood park there. So it's still donated and we get the tax write-off for the for-profit. And the nonprofit gets the funds that it needs to be able to manage the green space. So again, it still all goes back to business structure, managing the land that you already have dominion and authority over, but you have to know how these things work. So Steve, to bring it back to the questions you asked, that's where Before You Build came from. And I wanted to do this where we were providing master classes for undergraduate and graduate students to be able to learn this information. We plan on having this as a 4-day course, not a 4-day all-day course, but it's about 2 hours each session over 4 days where they can enroll in. They'll get the free replay. Obviously there is a cost, but it's an investment. I told my students last night, I said, guys, you know, you're getting ready to pay for a master class that's less than $300, but can somebody tell me how much does it cost for an appraiser? What did we learn earlier? They said an appraiser was like $700. I said, exactly.
Yeah.
So $700 just for the appraiser. We didn't even get to your down payment. We didn't get to legal fees. We didn't get to inspections or anything else. So why not invest in yourself and learn the information now so you're prepared for the future? And I think that if we do this with our students early on, it will be really helpful. So I'm looking forward to some of these schools that I've reached out to see the value and why it's important to have this as either, you know, strongly encourage supplemental information, or feel free to enroll it in your curriculum and we can partner.
That's wonderful. Gary, you want to take it home?
Yeah, so we thank you for your macro social work story. And what I hear is exposure. You had a mentor who pushed you, who said, no, it's not an option.
No.
And so because it's not an option, things were able to be done. Social work as we know it is never going to be the same. And so we have to look at how we could not just say that we partner with communities, but what I hear you and actually demonstrating is partnering on using your human behavior theoretical frameworks, all of our values to bring about generational change, land ownership, the have and have nots. You said a lot of various things that really is needed in our classrooms. We should not hope our students are exposed to it one day. This should be a part of social work. If we're supposed to be agents of change, where is the change curriculum coming from? And so we thank you for your macro story. We thank you for being an example on what we really can do to really bring communities to the table and hearing their voice. So thank you. We look forward to partnering with you. We look forward to having you back on this podcast so that we can learn more and partner as we bring about desired change, individuals, communities, as we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. And if anybody is interested in grabbing a copy of our book, you can go to beforeyoubuildebook.com and get your copy today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.